this to do with the bank account, the cash book, or is it to do with petty cash? And then is it money in or is it money out? And you just record it in the appropriate place. For the sales and purchases, you record it in the appropriate ledger, and when the customer pays you, or when you pay for your supplies, you fill in the end columns. And then you summarise each month, you check with the bank, a bank reconciliation, to check your figures are right, and then you move on to next month. Nice and easy. What I want to look at now, if this will move, is sales forecasting. You have to show that you've got a viable business idea. So you have to show that it's likely to become profitable. Remember, it may not be profitable on day one. In most businesses, money goes out rather than coming in when you start a business, which is why you need to have enough money to make sure you don't run out. But as long as you can show that you think your business will become profitable at some point in the future, and as long as you've got enough money to get there, then you've still got a viable business idea. So you have to forecast what your likely running costs are going to be, and you have to forecast what your sales income is going to be. Running costs, that's not too difficult. If you can remember all the running costs you're likely to have, you can usually find suppliers or go online and you'll find a picture of what these things are going to cost you. It's the sales forecasting that's a bit more difficult, because you have to forecast monthly. It says here for 1 year. Most funders nowadays are looking for 2 years. So they're looking for your forecast of your sales each month for the first 24 months. And that's where a lot of our clients meet a barrier. Is how the heck are you going to forecast your sales? How do you know what your sales are going to be when you start with a new business? You don't. So that's a good starting point. You're not going to be right. All we want you to do is be sensible. We want you to do research into the marketplace, find out how much money is being spent in your market, find out who the competitors are, find out where you fit into that market, and then estimate, based on that information, what you think your sales will be. Okay? We're just looking at sales forecasting now and how difficult that can be if you try to get it right. You will never ever get your sales forecasting right. It's impossible.
Sorry, is there a on the record?
Okay. Sales forecasting is impossible to get right because there's too many outside factors that affect business. Recessions can reduce your sales. Good advertising can increase your sales. The weather can affect your sales. You're never ever going to get your sales forecasting right. All we want you to do when you're preparing a story is to estimate it in a reasonable way that makes sense. Every funding organisation, every support organisation knows it's not going to be right. As long as you're sensible, you'll come up with logical figures that people can accept. Your job, once you get started, is to monitor what we forecast and what's actually happening. It's not going to be the same. You've then got to investigate why. What's the cause that your sales are not what you expected them to be? And what can you do about it? So when you try to forecast your sales, try and be logical. Don't just pick a figure out of the sky. £50,000 a month. That sounds nice. I'll stick that into a sales forecast. You need some sort of justification. So there's various ways you can forecast sales. Here's one. This is called the capacity-based method. Basically, this is somebody starting up a business and they are making and selling garden chairs. So what they're doing is they're saying, I'm going to work 5.5 days a week in this business. Taking a day and a half off to have fun. Of these 5.5 days, I'll need to spend 1 day doing management tasks and administrative tasks, so I'll not be able to make chairs. I'll need to spend half a day dealing with customers and suppliers. So that leaves me 4 days to make garden chairs. Everybody okay with the sums there so far? And he says, I know that given peace and quiet, I can make 10 chairs a day. 4 days a week, that's 40 chairs a week. Approximately 160 chairs a month. And I know from research I've done that I'm likely to get £25 per chair. So I can say my sales forecast is going to be 160 chairs multiplied by £25, £4,000 a month. Everybody okay with that? Multiply that by 12 and you've got £48,000 annual sales. That's one method of forecasting your sales. There's another way called the market-led method, which actually looks into a lot more detail. Doing research into how much money is actually spent in garden chairs. And statistics that you'll be able to get hold of will tell you garden chairs in Scotland last year, £2 million. I don't know if that information is correct, I just made that figure up. But you'll be able to get the figure for your industry. Because the government and local authorities produce information in almost every industry there is of how much is being spent and what the trends are in demand and the trends are in price. You'll be able to estimate. Greater Glasgow, which is the marketplace for this business, has approximately 30% of the population of Scotland. So if total sales in Scotland were 2 million, it's reasonable to assume that 30% of that, approximately, will be spent in the Glasgow area, based on population. So we can make an assumption here. The sales in Glasgow were probably round about 30% of the total, 600,000. We've looked at the competition and we've discovered there's 19 other businesses, much the same size as us, in the marketplace. So again, it's reasonable to assume we'll get a 20th share of that when we start up. And if the total market's 600,000, a 20th of that is 30,000. So that's likely to be our sales. But we'll be very conservative because we're brand new, nobody knows us. So in the first year we're not going to get the full share. We'll be conservative and we'll say we'll get 50% of the full share in year one. So we'll only get £15,000 and that's our annual sales. That's how we've calculated that. Everybody follow the logic there as well? Mm-hmm. Leaves you with a dilemma though. Which one do you put into your business plan? Do you put 15,000 which is based on demand, or do you put 48,000 based on capacity? Any thoughts on that? Somewhere in between? Somewhere in between. Possibly. Any other thoughts? Both. Both? Could be, yes. You could have two separate projections running. Remember, that one's based on what you can produce. It's taking no account of what the actual market demand is. So that's probably not a very good one to use, unless you can prove that you're so much better that everything you make will be sold. And that's a big assumption to make when you're running a business. People will think you're screwy if you do that, unless you can guarantee it, unless you can show why. The 15,000 is a much more logical one to use, because it's based on reality. It's based on demand. It's taking into account that you're new, and the 15,000 is probably the better bet to use for your sales forecasting. But you should always calculate that bottom one. Not so much from a sales point of view as a production point of view. How busy can you be? If the market takes off, or if we get a heat wave, or if you are that much better than anybody else, it's quite possible you'll be able to sell everything you can make. But if you go to sell more than that, you can't cope with it. And if you can't cope, your quality falls. So it's essential you know your capacity in whatever way you measure it. If you're in consultancy, it's about your time. If it's about making products, it's about how many can you make. Always know the maximum that you can cope with. Because one day, with Business Gateway's help, you're all going to be very successful business people, and your sales are going to be up and up and up. You need to know the top. You need to know when you can't cope anymore. Because if you want to keep growing at that stage, You've got to take on extra resources. You may need more money, or you may need new machines, or you may need a bigger factory, or you may have to spend more time on it, or you may have to take on extra staff to cope with it. So always calculate your capacity. How busy can you be? But don't use it as a sales forecast unless it's sensible. You're better using statistical information. What's this? How much is being spent in your marketplace? How many competitors are there? And what's your reasonable likely share to be? Sales forecasting comes from research and logical assumptions. So there will be statistics for almost every industry there is. How much money is spent in your target market area. And therefore, once you know how many competitors there are, and once you know the breakdown of that, it may be there are several other businesses the same size as you, and it's reasonable to assume you'll get an equal share. But it may be that one or two of the big international companies are in your marketplace, and they've got 80% of the market sewn up. The only bit you can even look at is the other 20%, unless you can prove you're better than these big boys. So, sales forecasting comes from doing research. Customer behaviour, competitor behaviour, when do customers buy, how much do they buy, what are they paying, what are the trends in demand and the trends in price. And you can estimate the likely sales that you'll get. As I said before, it won't be right. Your job is to monitor once you get started. What did we expect? What did we get? What's the difference? Why is the difference? And what can we do about it? It also depends on your pricing policy, because it depends where you are in the marketplace. And there's different places you can be. You can have a low price, lower than anybody else. Don't assume that will get you more business, but it might. And a lot of businesses start off in the early days with a slightly lower price than anybody else, hoping they will get more. They might not. Because at the end of the day, customers are buying on the quality as much as the price. You might decide to go in with a high price, because you're emphasising the quality that you've got. You're in the high price, high quality end. It might be somewhere in between. Market positioning is something we look at in the marketing workshop. But basically that is, whereabouts are you in the market? Are you at the Harrods end of the market, high price, high quality? Or are you at the pound stretchers end of the market, low price, low quality? Both very successful businesses, because they're providing value for money and they know who they're targeting. So maybe you go for a niche market, high or low, or it may be you have a range of products and services so that you can target everybody with different prices and different qualities. As it says at the bottom there, basically your pricing policy must ensure that you make profits at some point, that your income exceeds your costs. But it can be done in different ways. You decide where you want to be in the market. We've also got to look at additional things, seasonality and startup business. In the second example we looked at, we took into account startup. We said we expect to get 30,000 a year, but because we're new, we'll have that. There are other ways to go about that. You can do it on a month-to-month basis if you like. If we accept the 4,000 is a realistic target for you to get sales of, then in April, when we're brand new and nobody knows us, we'll only get 40% of our real share. So we'll only get 1,600 sales. In month 2, as we get better known, we'll get 60%. In month 3, we'll get 80%. By month 4, we'll be right into the marketplace. It won't happen as quickly as that. But you see the basic principle here? We're just saying as we get better known, we'll get more of our real share. So instead of using 4,000 a month, we would use these figures as our sales forecast. And if there's seasonality involved in your business, and there is in a lot of businesses, you have to take that into account as well. Take an example. Oh, yeah.
I was just going to tell you, it's kind of like seasonality. How do you account for cancellations? Because obviously I teach about once a month, someone says, oh, no, I'm ill. I can't come. How do I account for that?
That's a more difficult one, because there probably won't be statistics about that. but it would have to be your own experience or your own